A Treatise of Satan's Temptations. Part 2. By Richard Gilpin. A Discourse of the Malice, Power, Cruelty and Diligence of Satan. Chapter 7, Part 2. Of the second way to hinder peace. Affrightments, the general nature and burden of them, in several particulars. What are the ways by which he affrights? 1. Atheistical injections. Observations of his proceeding in them. 2. Blasphemous thoughts. 3. Affrightful suggestions of reprobation. Observations of his proceedings in that course. 4. Frightful motions to sin. 5. Strong immediate impressions of fear. 6. A frightful scrupulosity of conscience. Now the things by which Satan works these affrightments, are contrary to nature or grace, or both together. And as they will strive to the utmost of their ability to cast out what is so opposite to them, so must the devil to the utmost of his ability, if he would carry his design, strengthen himself in his force, and from hence, as when fire and water are committed together, ariseth a most troublesome conflict. And indeed if there were a compliance of our consent, there would be no affrightment, neither can this kind of temptation be managed, except there be the utmost descent of the mind. If any think there is no great ground for these temptations, because some of the particulars by which he is said to affright men, are natural to us, as, for instance, atheistical thoughts, which are by some called the master vein of our original corruption, and by others said to be in the heart of every man naturally, and then consequently not so troublesome as is imagined, etc. I answer, that when divines call these or blasphemous thoughts natural, they do not mean that they are natural impressions, engraven on us by creation, for they assert the contrary. That it is a natural and unextinguishable impression, upon every man that there is a God, etc. And usually given this for proof, that the greatest atheists in fear and extremity, will manifest a secret belief of a deity, by calling out, O God, etc. Or by some other posture, as Caligula by hiding himself when it thundered, but they mean only that our natural corruption may produce these thoughts, and that they are the natural issues thereof. And therefore Perkins, in answer to a question of this nature, tells us that these two thoughts, there is a God, and there is no God, may be, and are both, in the same heart. Now as this will give us the reason, why Satan doth make choice of these thoughts to trouble us withal, which may also rise from ourselves, which I have hinted before, and shall presently again touch upon, so it tells us still that whether these thoughts arise from our own corruption or from Satan, our natural impressions are strong against them, and withal that they cannot be so affrightful, but when Satan doth manage them, and when the contrary impressions of nature are awakened, to give strong resistance, and then that struggling must be as the tearing of our bowels, and still the worse in that, we are incessantly pursued. Satan still casting back with unwearied labor, the same thoughts as they are repulsed and rejected, as soldiers that besiege cities, use to cast over the walls their fired grenades. Second, these are also grievous, as they set the mind upon the rack, and stretch it under laborious and doubtful inquiries, after the grounds or causes, of this kind of trouble, for the heart, astonished with such cursed guests against his will, presently reflects upon God and itself, what have I done, and wherefore am I thus disquieted with monsters? Why doth the righteous Lord suffer Satan, to break open my heart, and fill me with such fearful thoughts? But when men's inquiries are not so high, but detained in a consideration of the nature of the trouble and manner of its working, without looking up to the providence of God, then are their troubles increased. Third, as these injections necessitate men, in their own defense, to oppose and every way to resist, it is an increase of the burden. What pleadings are they put to, what defiances, what endeavors to call off the thoughts? And all to little purpose. While the trouble continues they are forced to lie in their armor, and to be constantly in their ward. Fourth, and yet are they further troublesome in the after game that Satan plays by these thoughts. It is not all of his design to affright men, but he usually hath another temptation to come in the rear of this, and that is to turn these affrightments into accusations, and by urging them long upon the hearts of men, to make them believe that they are their own thoughts, the issues of their own natural corruption, and after men are by continual assaults weakened, their senses and memory dulled, their understanding confounded, etc., they easily conclude against themselves. The tempter imputes all the horrid blasphemy to them, boldly calls them guilty of all. And because their thoughts have dwelled long upon such a subject, and withal knowing that corrupt nature of itself will lead men to such horrid blasphemies or villainies, which makes it probable that it might be their own fault, and for this reason, Satan makes choice of such injections, as may in the accusation seem most likely to be true, being strongly charged as guilty, they yield. And then begins another trouble more fearful than the former. Oh, What sad thoughts have they then of themselves, as the most vile blasphemous wretches? Sometimes they think that it is impossible that other men's hearts should entertain such intolerable things within them as theirs, and that none was ever so bad as they. Sometimes they think that if men knew what vile imaginations and monstrous things are in their minds, they would in very zeal to God and religion stone them, or at least exclude them from all commerce with men. Sometimes they think their sin to be the sin against the Holy Ghost. Sometimes they think God is engaged in point of honor, to show upon them some remarkable judgment, and they verily look for some fearful stroke to confound them, and live under such a frightful expectation. These and many more to this purpose are their thoughts, so that these temptations are every way troublesome, both in their first and second effects. Thus I have in the general expressed the nature of these affrightments. What the particular injections are by which he studies to affright men, I shall next declare. They are principally 6. 1. Atheistical thoughts. By injecting these into the mind he doth exceedingly affright men, and frequently for that end doth he suggest that there is no God, and that the Scriptures are but delusive contrivances, etc. Concerning these I shall note a few things, as 1. Though there be an observable difference betwixt atheistical injections and temptations to atheism, not only in the design, Satan chiefly intending seduction in the latter, and affrightment, by the former, but also in the manner of proceeding, for when he designs chiefly to tempt to atheism, he first prepares his way by debauching the conscience with vicious or negligent living, according to Psalm 14:1, that which makes men say in their hearts there is no God, is this, that they are corrupt, and have done abominable works, and in this method was famous Junius tempted to atheism, but when he chiefly intends to affright, he sets upon men that by a watchful and strict conversation, cut off from him that advantage, yet he doth so manage himself that he can turn his course either way, as he finds probability of success after trial, for he presseth on upon men most, where he finds them most to yield, so that those who were but at first affrighted, may at last be solemnly persuaded and urged to believe the suggestion to be true, if they give him any encouragement for such a procedure. 2. Contemplative heads and great searchers, are usually most troubled in this manner, partly because they see more difficulties than other men, and are more sensible of human inability to resolve them, and partly because God, who will not suffer his children to be tempted above what they are able, doth not permit Satan to molest the weaker sort of Christians with such dangerous assaults. 3. Persons of eminent and singular holiness may be, and often are, troubled with atheistical thoughts, and have sad conflicts about them, Satan laboring, where he cannot prevail for a positive entertainment of atheism, at least to disquiet their minds, by haunting them with his injections, if not to weaken their assent to these fundamental truths, in which he sometimes so prevails, that good men have publicly professed, that they have found it a harder matter to believe, that there is a God than most do imagine. 4. Satan lies at the catch in this design, and usually takes men at the advantage, suddenly setting upon them, either in the height of their meditations and inquiries into fundamental truths, for when they soar aloft, and puzzle themselves with a difficulty, then is he at hand to advise them to cut the knot which they cannot unloose, or in the depth of their troubles, for when men cannot reconcile the daily afflictions and sufferings which they undergo, with the love and care of God toward his children, then it is Satan's season to tell them that there is no supreme disposer of things. In both these cases the devil leaps upon them unawares, like a robber out of a thicket, who, if he do not wound them by the dart of atheistical injection, at least he is sure to astonish them, and to confound them with amazement. 4. Thanks.